Welcome to Madison City Channel's Know Your Candidate interviews, co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Dane County. I'm your interviewer, Shel Gross, and I would like to introduce David Peterson, running for Dane County Supervisor in District 36. As we begin, I'd like you to give an opening statement as to the educational, vocational, and civic experience you have, which qualifies you for the office, and why you are running for the Dane County Board.
So my name is David Peterson. I live in Cottage Grove. I've been married to my wife, Dawn, for almost 15 years. We have 3 children, all boys, 14, 12, and 9. It's never a dull moment around here. I went to school at Illinois State University for my bachelor's and my master's degree. I've been in IT for the entirety of my career. I work at Microsoft. I'm an Azure App Innovation Specialist, so work with banks and insurance companies and capital markets firms to take their applications to the cloud. As far as the civic and civic experience, I've been on the Cottage Grove Village Board. This is my second term. I'm also on the ADRC governing board. I've been the chair for the last year on the county committee. Ultimately, I'm deeply committed to making a positive impact in our community. I've lived in Cottage Grove for almost a decade, 9 years. I've developed a strong connection to the area and the residents. And not only being on the board has deepened my understanding of local issues, but it's also reinforced my belief in proactive, responsive governance. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you. What do you view as the most significant budget issues facing the board, and how would you propose addressing them?
Right. I think, as of this last board meeting on Thursday, the jail consolidation project, I think, is one that we all need to really take notice of and be aware of, right? There's never a cheaper time to build anything than right now. And this has been, roughly 20 years in the making. And I think it's very, very, very important that we focus on the jail consolidation project. I think our current jail is woefully inadequate. I've heard terms of medieval and inhumane, and I think that while no one celebrates or enjoys incarceration, we also understand that when that does happen, we want to give people a place that's safe, secure, humane, right? We want to be good stewards of our fellow neighbors. And so I think the jail consolidation project, I think, is a big one. I think also too, in terms of highlighting several other issues, I think housing is a big issue in the county. When I joined the Cottage Grove Village Board, I was the chair of the ad hoc housing committee. Unbelievable to me just how much housing can affect things, right? And how deeply rooted that can either cause harm or help situations for individuals. I also saw that on the ADRC governing board as well. Just housing is unbelievable. It's how far reaching it can be and how important it is. And again, for the casual observer, it's hard to make some of these connections, but being an elected has helped me understand this is a big deal. And then I think economic development, right? That's also the driver here behind housing, right? So how do we have meaningful economic development? What's interesting here in District 36 is that we have a unique blend of urban, suburban, and rural, municipalities or neighborhoods, right? And so we have to pay credence to that, and we have to understand that those have each unique needs. But then, so how do we provide for these different community types in a meaningful way, but that also respects their way of living, right? And so those are things that we need to think about. So I think that's good. Go ahead, Joe.
What do you see as the next right steps for the county to take in addressing mental illness and substance use disorders to divert people from the criminal justice system?
Right. I've always prided myself, Shel, on not being the expert on all things, right? A lot of times, we'll hear from especially national politicians, right? I have all the answers. I do not have all the answers. I'm here to tell you. But what I do bring is a unique skill set to help bridge gaps, to bring communities together, bring experts together. You know, ultimately from a mental health and substance abuse perspective, I want to talk to the experts. I have, in talking with current supervisors on the board, they've mentioned this issue. I've then taken that and then reached out to other professionals that I'm aware of, like, you know, in the state Department of Health and other friends that work, you know, nurses, doctors, that sort of thing, and ask, like, how do we solve these problems? And I'm just trying to educate myself, right? And again, I don't have all the answers, but ultimately what I'm trying to do is build a level of knowledge of, like, how do we solve this problem? And it is infinitely complicated, right? Housing plays a part, economic development plays, like, this stuff is all intertwined, and that's not by mistake either. So to answer your question, like, my job is to be, you know, something of a marriage counselor, right? Connecting experts, so staff, management, other supervisors, and getting everybody together and say, okay, like, how do we solve this problem? Everyone's going to have an opinion, right? And they're not necessarily all going to agree. So that's our job as electeds, is to say, okay, how do we distill this down? How do we have an understanding? And then how do we move forward? You know, as an example, you know, some supervisors have talked about safe injection sites. That's a very, very charged issue, right? To say the least. I have reached out to experts and said, what is this? How does this work? I'm not a drug user myself, right? So, like, I can't pretend to know how people who are drug users, how they live their lives, right? So I'm just trying to build an understanding. So to answer your question, my job is to connect people, the experts, help inform, and then let's ultimately collectively find a way forward.
Thank you. How would you evaluate the county's current efforts to address homelessness? And are there any additional steps you believe the county should take to address this issue?
That's an interesting one, Chel. I think that again, I don't have all the answers, but what I can say is that the county is definitely working to try to improve this, right? I think, again, this kind of feeds right into the housing conversation, right? And so, you know, I've heard lots of opinions and lots of ideas on how to solve this crisis. How we've, you know, in our own community of Cottage Grove, we have worked to bring affordable housing to the community, and that was not met with welcome arms, just to truth be told. I want to respect and have a level of understanding for people who don't want affordable housing in our community. I get that, right? I understand where that comes from, but I also understand that a lot of that is driven by stereotypes, right? And that doesn't mean just because we have stereotypes that we can't do something, right? Like, we have to do the hard work here. So in terms of homelessness, I believe that the city and the county, the city of Madison and the county, are doing lots. We can always do more. How do we do that? Again, to me, it comes down to housing, right? How do we provide more affordable housing? There's just not enough housing to go around, right? So we have to have public-private partnerships. We have to work with developers. We have to work with local municipalities to understand their TIF districts and what drives them and their motivations and what's in their comp plans, right? And come up with a holistic plan to solve this, but do it. You know, everyone likes to talk about a carrot and a stick. This has to be a carrot, right? And less stick, far more carrot. And how do we do that? Ultimately, I think we need to provide incentives, and we are doing that in the county. But what's working and what's not working, and if elected, that's my plan. Is like, let's identify what's working and what's not, and then move from there accordingly.
Concerns continue about noise abatement related to the presence of F-35s, fighter jets, and PFAS pollution at the airport. What would you seek to do about these concerns if elected?
One, learn to work to understand, right? Like, I am reading about this. I am, reading news articles. I've done my own, starting to do research, going to the library, trying to understand PFAS. Like, what are these? Why are they harmful? Right? Like, that's part of my education, right? Is like, before I can form an opinion, let's get educated, right? And then on top of it, let's not be afraid to continue to inform our opinion, right? Like it's not a destination, right? It's a continuum. It's a work in progress. So, from the noise abatement side, again, this is where we bring experts in, and I understand that the Air Force, we need these things because these aircraft, because they do provide jobs, they do provide safety, security. There's a whole lot of positives, but let's also be honest about the cons of what these. I live in Cottage Grove, and when these things take off, they're loud, right? So, and I'm in Cottage Grove. Imagine what the people who are living next to the airport, what are they experiencing, right? So, I think for me, if elected, I want to fully become aware and understand and help figure out a way forward. Now, there are supervisors on the board today that are working, especially on the PFAS issue. I think I have a vague understanding right now of what's going on, but like understanding how staff, the staff attorneys, the Air Force, and how like the board supervisors are working together. That's an interesting dilemma right now, I'll put it that way, right? And so that's one that I would hope to contribute to and help alleviate, and let's find a compromise and move forward.
What else, if anything, should Dane County be doing to address health disparities?
Ooh, good question. I think that this is where we need to lean on the experts, right? You asked me that question. It reminds me of COVID days, right? And how, you know, the experts were telling us at the Department of Health, like, here's what we should do and here's what we should be doing. And there was a lot of pushback on that. And I understand that every idea should have a healthy dose of challenge to it, right? But when it's science-based, when it's fact-based, we can't let opinions trump facts. You know what I mean? And so, what can we do? I think that, again, I always go back to housing. Housing and transportation are two of the biggest issues in our community. And again, I'm seeing that on the ADRC, right? And so a lot of the customers of the ADRC are in that, in that light that you outlined, right? Like, how can we do more for mental health, and how can we do more for homelessness, and how can we help more people, right? And I think housing and transportation, while not the ultimate solution, those are big contributors as to how we can help people.
Please tell us about other priorities for the residents of your district that we have not yet addressed and how you would propose addressing them.
Right. I've talked a lot about housing. I've talked a lot about economic development. I think the other things that are really big in our community are public safety, right? So EMS, fire, police, those are huge, right? And I think EMS, especially in other parts of the county, even in this district, but I would say in all districts, right? EMS, that is a service that is vital, that is important, that we all need. When you call 911, you want to make sure that the ambulance shows up, right? And so being an elected has helped me understand that this is far more nuanced and far more complex than I think. And again, I'm just a little bit into it. I don't know it all, right? So it's like, how do we help provide the tools for our communities when it comes to EMS? And so I think that's a big one. And then also too, more on the personal side, but all still important, is biking and walking infrastructure. I worked at Trek Bikes for a while. I'm a big believer in bikes. I think it's a simple solution to a complex problem. And we have some of the best bike and walking paths in frankly, I'm a little biased, but I think in the world, but especially in the state. And but that means we can always do better, right? And so, especially in this district, connecting Glacial Drumlin to Madison is a gigantic achievement that I hope we accomplish, right? And it has been a long road. It's been 25, 30 years or so since that project started. It still has a long way to go, but that one I'm really hopeful that we can get across the finish line.
What would you like to say to the viewing audience as we complete this interview?
Well, Shel, I appreciate the time here. I think that for me, the big thing is that I bring a level of experience and education and understanding, right, that I think is good for this district. I think I can accurately and efficiently represent the residents of this district. I try to make myself ridiculously easy to get a hold of, and try to provide a sense of understanding, right? I can only understand the world through the eyes that I've lived in, and I try to work to understand people who live different lives, look different, feel different, believe different things than me. And I feel that I can represent everyone, even if I don't necessarily agree with everything that people say, right? And I think that's what's missing, I think, in today's discourse and within our political environment today, is that we need to have a level of understanding and patience and grace. And that ultimately, I think I have lots of opinions and I have lots of ideas, But ultimately, I think what my strength is that I can bring a level of patience, understanding, and grace that may not exist in everyone else, right? And so, again, I appreciate the time, Shell, and thank you.
I want to thank David for speaking with us and thank the viewing audience for taking the time to know your candidates. I want to remind everyone that primary election day is February 20th and the general election is Tuesday, April 2nd. Every election is important. Please vote. On behalf of Madison City Channel and the League of Women Voters of Dane County, thank you for joining us.